All right, hello and welcome to MySec Jackson for November. We've got lightning talks this month with Mr. Sam Bradstreet and Mr. Isaac Dunham. Just a quick announcement first. MySecCon is this Friday, 17th. There should still be a couple tickets left, I think, at least. So check that out on the website if you're interested. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Sam.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. I'm going to be talking about virtualization tonight, specifically virtualization for cheapskates like me. So this talk was inspired by some nostalgia. Perhaps like me, some of you took a bunch of technology classes in college, and as a result, you got all kinds of juicy student licenses for premium software like VMware Workstation that made running labs for various technology and cyber projects super easy. It has a great interface. It's a one-stop shop for a whole bunch of virtualization functions. But I am no longer a student, and it's 2023. Everything is super expensive. Housing is through the roof. Double cheeseburgers at McDonald's cost $1 million, and we can't afford to buy VMware products. So what's the answer? Open source, of course. Isaac has a question.
McDonald's cheeseburgers also taste horrible now, too.
They do taste horrible as well. I am struggling internally with the thought that I could go there soon-ish if they're still doing the McRib around Christmas time and get that for nostalgia's sake. But even if I pay on an installment plan like they offer on their website, which is just crazy, it's probably going to taste like garbage. And again, that's why we have open source virtualization, to take our mind off of all the terrible, expensive things in the world. Oh, hold on a second. I have to figure out how to move my slides in this interface. Hey, look at that. We learned how to technology. So in case anybody online doesn't know who I am, I'm Sam. I'm a security engineer. And when I'm not dinking around on computers, I like to go outside and touch grass and try to do other things like hunting and fishing, usually unsuccessfully. But hey, at least I'm doing it out in the woods, and that's healthy, right? So our objective, we've decided that we don't want to pay for expensive, icky VMware licenses anymore. But that means that we're going to the open source world where there's not one individual product that you purchase. Instead, you have bifurcation up the wazoo, and so many individual products and forks, and different architectures, different strategies to contend with when it comes to the solutions you want to use. So I will try to clear up all of these confusing ancient runes. This is just a lightning talk. I'm not going to do any demos, building VMs or containers, or importing images, nothing like that. I'm just going to shove you out the door on your grand adventure. And because I am a wizard, or at least I have the beard that a wizard is supposed to have, I am going to follow in the tradition of all great wizards and abandon you right before the most perilous part of the journey, and you have to go slay the dragon yourself. So be prepared to go hacking, because I'm not going to do it for you. So let's start with all these all of these confusing runes that only show up when the moon shines on them and whatnot. If you start diving into the world of open source virtualization, you're going to come across all kinds of acronyms and different projects that have occurred over the years that will offer to help you with your problems, but it's easy to get a bit lost in the minutia. So we're going to divide. Well, first of all, we're going to talk just about some of the most popular ones. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to cover every open source project, and there are definitely others out there that are worthy of consideration, but we're going to try to focus on the ones that may be most helpful for everyone's different efforts, and we're going to split them into full hypervisors, So software that behaves more or less like we would expect our example of VMware Workstation to run. And we'll also talk about containerization. It's the new hotness, but that's not going to be my main focus. There are a couple of things that are worth mentioning in that space, though, that may match your use case. So let's talk about some of the hypervisors that exist out there that you can run on your system. And this will mostly apply to situations where you bought yourself a laptop or you've put together a desktop, you've installed Ubuntu or Linux Mint or Pop! OS or Fedora or something on it, and you now want to install virtualization software. Some of these technologies will run in other operating systems, but this is mostly a Linux focus, both because I like Linux and Linux is cool, but you also don't have to pay for a license for Linux. So you're getting both your operating system and your virtualization technology for free, as long as you're willing to jump through the hurdles to learn how you have to run it. So the first one we're going to talk about is QEMU. And I'm not going to entertain debates about how to pronounce that. It's just a mess of a word. QEMU is an abbreviation for Quick Emulator, and emulator is a very key word for this piece of technology. It's an old open source project that exists from before AMD and Intel started offering hardware-assisted virtualization in your BIOS settings. We've probably all gone through that rigmarole before, where you try to run a VM on your workstation and you find out that, oh no, it can't execute because not all of the necessary extensions have been enabled at the hardware level. The way that QEMU used to get around this was that it would emulate the entire CPU in software, which is really cool. I can't imagine how much work must have gone into that, but pretty epic for the developers to have accomplished that. And one of the benefits that that gives us today, even though we still have better hardware virtualization, and QEMU can take advantage of that, they have updated the project to be more compatible with newer features that Intel and AMD have given us. This means that QEMU still has the ability to emulate different architectures. So if you want to do some research with ARM or one of the many implementations of RISC or architectures I haven't heard of before. I was looking at the list earlier today, and it includes something called LoonGark, which I'm probably saying incorrectly, but that's what stuck in my head. So if you know what LoonGark is, or if you don't know and you want to play with it, QEMU will support that, which is pretty awesome. And again, it's not something you have to pay for. So you can take this in all sorts of different directions. The next hypervisor technology is KVM, kernel-based virtual machines, a very straightforward acronym, which is not typically the case, but we'll run with it while we have that option. So this project was stood up in 2007, if I'm not mistaken, and it has been integrated into the Linux kernel. Again, very befitting the name. So if you've installed pretty much, oh, Kyle was giving me a look. Now I lost my place.
I was enjoying the talk.
Oh, okay. you just had me worried for a second. So if you have freshly installed pretty much any modern Linux distribution, you have KVM pre-installed. It's part of the Linux kernel. It will get patched and have new features added as your distribution patches and maintains the kernel that your operating system was shipped with. So from an accessibility standpoint, it's really great. Pretty much everything you need to build a VM from any operating system is there. You don't just have the option of hosting Linux guest operating systems. You could run Windows. You could try your luck with Apple operating systems, Android, BSD, any others. And this is the most vanilla of the hypervisors that I have listed out here. you just want straightforward abilities to build VMs, this is probably the way you want to do it. And then finally, there is Zen. This is another older open source project that predates hardware virtualization extensions, and which has since integrated the ability to use them. So you get the performance boost that comes from that. And the unique feature about Zen is something called paravirtualization, which, according to the project, means that if you install the right guest operating system, because it's got to be a modified guest operating system, it will know that it's being virtualized, and because it's existing in that state of not thinking that it's on bare metal, it understands that it's being virtualized and that it has to jump through some different hoops. You can squeeze some more performance out of your VMs that you might not otherwise be able to, which from a performance standpoint could be really awesome. You might be able to run some, if you have VMs that you want to process a lot of load, this may be a great option for you. The downside, of course, as some of you might be thinking, is if you have a use case like a malware sandbox, maybe this isn't the best thing to do, because of course a lot of malware tries to detect when it's running in a virtual machine, so that it won't reveal any of its capabilities to researchers. So that may or may not be good for your particular use case, but I thought it was pretty cool while I was researching. Now let's talk a little bit about containers. Oh, and I should back up for a second. One note about, well, both hypervisors and the container technologies we're talking about is that because we're not dealing with products that are sold as a bundle, the whole kit and caboodle, most of the terms that I'm throwing out there refer to the back-end technology that enables a virtual machine or a container to work. It does not necessarily mean that these technologies include either the graphical or command line interface or API interface, if you like doing that, that's necessary to fully operate the virtual machines. But we will talk about the software that you can use as the front end for all of these technologies a little bit later. So back to containers. The big distinguishing characteristic between containers and virtual machines goes to the architectural level. Containers live higher up in the operating system stack, where a virtual machine will, generally speaking, have some level of direct access to your CPU, maybe your GPU, maybe USB devices. Which can be great for testing hardware when you need very specific operating systems or software to interact with it, but you don't necessarily have a full physical machine to dedicate it to. Containers exist a little bit higher up. They're not interacting directly with your hardware, generally speaking. I'll give that caveat because, of course, you could probably find someone who could make a container directly work with the I/O of some unusual hardware device out there, and all that's necessary to get them to go down that path is say it can't be done. So I won't make that mistake, and we'll see where the hardware projects go from there. But for most use cases, containers are going to be less resource intensive because they take away some of the hardware features that you can benefit from with a full virtual machine. And I'm going to divide the different container technologies that we have a little bit. Docker and Podman. Docker's probably a name that a lot of people recognize. These two solutions do pretty much exactly the same thing. Podman just accomplishes the same goals as Docker, with slightly using the underlying operating system a little bit differently. But both of these focus on virtualizing individual processes. So let's say that you really want to research or learn the Tomcat web server, or an SMTP server, or running a DNS service. If you just want to hone in on one particular thing, Docker or Podman could be great for creating a sandbox so that you're not installing and uninstalling and reconfiguring something on bare metal all the time. And being containers, it takes away the complexity that you would experience if you were running them in a full virtual machine, having to deal with the operating system and the network connectivity of your guest OS and all of those things. So if you just want to be hyper specialized and also very resource conscious, because we're only virtualizing a particular process or service, Docker and Podman are pretty awesome for that. Linux containers are something of a hybrid, if you will, between a traditional container and a full virtual machine. They are not, and you can debate the accuracy of the terms, but they're not a full virtual machine in the sense that they don't bring their own kernel. So if you're going to run a Linux container, you're going to be running a Linux guest that's compatible with the kernel of your host operating system. But as long as that meets your particular use case, Linux containers can be really great for, again, being resource conscious, because you don't have to virtualize the kernel. That can be shared between systems, but you still get that sandbox to play with the services on top of that run on an operating system. So these would be a little bit more optimized for doing something like running a LAMP stack, where you have several services all running together on the same host in order to provide some kind of functionality. Maybe it's a matrix server, a LAMP stack, like we said, or maybe you want to have a lot of the features you get with a virtual machine, but perhaps you're running a laptop that doesn't have a lot of spare battery, CPU, memory, etc. These will run lighter on your system and still allow you to practice running pretty much an entire operating system. And as promised, there are dozens of quality front ends that you could choose for your hypervisors or containerization technologies. Virtual Machine Manager and GNOME boxes are both really good parallels to something like VMware Workstation or Fusion from the Apple world. They're meant to run on your laptop or your desktop, and they accomplish pretty much the same goals. Virtual Machine Manager is going to be a bit granular, a little bit more rough around the edges, where GNOME boxes is meant to be more of it's meant to be a prettier, more user-friendly experience, but you may not have access to all of the same features. I put my terminal emulator icon up there because there are a lot of command line interfaces to manage all of these hypervisors and containers. If you're a CLI junkie like me, you will be very happy to start playing with all of them. And we're also going to shout out Proxmox here. Now, this is a premium service. You can pay for a license with Proxmox, but if you don't need paid support, if you don't need anything other than their community forums, you can enable updates and features from their free repositories, and you're just on your own if you brick your system. But from the testing that I've done, Isaac could probably tell you a little bit more. I know he runs one of these as well. It's a pretty rock solid system. And one of the nice things about the software we're looking at on this page and that we discussed on the previous two slides, a lot of this tech is built into enterprise solutions. So if you find yourself enjoying playing with it, if you get comfortable with it, you start writing automations to streamline your workloads. If you get them talking to other services, controlling them with APIs, or if you learn how to harden them, a lot of those skills are directly applicable to things that you could do while you're making money. So this could be pretty helpful if you're thinking about where do you want to take your career next. If you like the idea of hosting and managing systems, this could be more than just a lab. It could be career prep for you. So that just about wraps it up. One last thing I want to shout out, Thanksgiving coming up next week. But remember, November isn't the only time to be thankful. And I started out this talk poking fun at how expensive things have gotten lately, and some dark observations of the world we find ourselves in. And I'm going to keep making those jokes because they're funny, and we all need a little negative humor now and then. But just I would advocate for everybody, try to balance all of that with thankfulness and gratitude, because yep, there are lots of horrible problems in this world. We can probably all see people around us who need a little bit more help. But just because there are real problems in the world doesn't mean that being thankful for what you have equates to complacency. Gratitude and complacency are not the same thing, and showing your gratitude and thinking about the things that mean a lot to you will give you the attitude and the energy you need to go out and solve those problems. So with that, are there any questions?
Do not see any questions at this time.
What's the current project you're working on with these virtual machines, or what's the use case you may use it more often?
The one that I alluded to it a little bit earlier in the talk. Oh, well, I should repeat in case folks couldn't hear Kyle's question. What project in the virtualization world would I like to tackle next, or am I focused on right now? I'm really lazy about it, but I want to run a matrix server under Proxmox and attach all kinds of bots and extra extensions to it, try to make it into an RSS reader, maybe play with some self-hosted AI to exchange jokes with. Will I accomplish all that? Who knows? It might very well exceed my capabilities, but I think that would be a lot of fun. And hopefully with some of the free time I have over the holidays, I'll be able to poke at that. So maybe I'll have a longer talk if down the road, if that becomes a success, or if it fails miserably and I just have a bunch of don't do this slides. All right, well, if there are no other questions, thanks everyone, and I will turn it over to Luke and Isaac.
All right, thanks, Sam. All right, Isaac, the floor is yours.
Hey everyone, good evening. I'm assuming the mic. Yeah, good evening. I think the microphone and everything is probably working. Uh, probably. Um, Today I'll be giving, or this evening I'll be giving a little fun presentation on the Eisenhower matrix and my favorite quadrant in it, which is a non-technical talk, but it's one that I find fun. Um, and then brief overview of who Isaac is. I currently work as a cybersecurity incident response analyst at a company. Kyle is my supervisor, and he's very bad at it. That's what I do. Um, and with that, we'll go to the first slide, where we introduce the endless problem that we all constantly deal with, which is we have too much crap to do and not enough time to do it. Within the world, there exists 1 trillion time management strategies, whether they be planner boards, scheduling calendar blocks where you say you won't allow yourself to be bothered, and then you respond to all the messages people send you in. Um, being more efficient. I'm going to touch upon this one very lightly. Um, being efficient is often touted as a placebo to productivity and getting everything done. And my experience is that an egg timer is not going to revolutionize your life. Uh, working with silly Pomodoro technique or whatever, there's only so much you can get out of efficiency. Not that it's not worth looking into, but you can't rely on it for everything. So basically, the problem is we have too much stuff to do, and as a result, things don't get done. And in our lives and in our careers, we aren't fulfilling all of the things that we wish we were, and we end up getting stuck. Um, so that is where I like to introduce the Eisenhower matrix, which I don't call the Eisenhower matrix, but other people do. I just call it the urgency importance matrix. And that is, it's all based in the silly one of these doubtful apocryphal quotes that you often find on the internet, which supposedly Mr. Dwight D. Eisenhower, who used to be a president, so I am told, um, so said that a university president said, so it's already a game of telephone. Uh, I have two kinds of problems, the urgent and the important. The urgent are not important, and the important are never urgent. Basically, this matrix exists as a way for you to identify tasks and how you should treat them. Different people will say that, well, if something is important but not urgent, delegate that away to someone else. And other recommendations for things in specific quadrants. I've never had the luxury of being able to delegate all my tasks away to other people, like my horrible boss, Kyle. But I do like the upper right quadrant there, which is working on things that are important but not urgent. And I have a saying that I live by, which is do more of that. Uh, and here we're going to talk about some different things, items that exist in this matrix. Not intensely, but things that are urgent and important can be broadly categorized as things on fire. Um, and a lot of us spend our days fighting fires. This thing is broken. This thing is awful. This is bad. And we go from fire to fire, putting them out, and it's terrible. Clear out the queue, fix the problem, etc. Uh, urgent but not important things, they come in the form of false alarms. They come in the form of my supervisor, Kyle, not understanding something and telling me he needs me to get something done ASAP. Um, I never listen to that guy. Work that's just not really related to your central mission. Though I will say, you may treat like chat messages as something that's urgent but not important, but these often are very good team building opportunities, which fall into the category of important but not urgent. So that's fun. Uh, the only thing I'll say about not important and not urgent work is to stop creating meetings that have no expected input or output and no agenda. Let's not do that anymore as a species. That's my opinion. Um, my talk today covers things that are important but not urgent. So that includes career planning, developing skills that may not help you immediately but might be relevant to you in 6 months, preventative maintenance. Uh, are you assuming that things work? Probably don't do that and just do some double checking to make sure things are working as you expect to prevent future problems. Preventative maintenance is very neglected. So some people like to point at these quadrants and they like to think about what are the good things from all the quadrants. I like to look at the bad things. Now, maybe that's a negative view on life, but things that are important and urgent are typically actually things that you should absolutely prioritize because, very broadly speaking, if urgent and important is a fire, if you don't put the fire out, your house burns down. And that can take the form of Kyle firing you.
Specifically.
Project deadlines not being met, things getting delayed, getting unnecessary attention. Not good stuff. But the consequences of not spending time in the not urgent but important world are kind of more insidious. So let's say you don't do any career planning, and as a result, you learned a skill that puts you in a dead end, and you get a job title that is a dead end job title in a industry that is fading away and will not be relevant. That's silly, and that's really bad, and it's a delayed terror. Uh, Failing develops to develop skills and keep up with the times in your field, you might not be able to do your job in the future. You may get laid off when things that come into the world are better than you are at your old way of doing things. Uh, so failing to do preventative maintenance results in horrible things like outages and audit findings. Let's assume that, let's say, for example, that you have a report that runs and you assume it works in a particular way because that's how it was set up 10 years ago. Is it still capturing all of the data that it's supposed to be? Have there maybe been underlying changes in your infrastructure that change the nature of what should be expected and gathered and desired of that report? Probably, maybe. And the moment you find that out, bad. So it's good to do preventative maintenance. So now I'm going to talk about some day-to-day life of living in the correct quadrant and how I applied it in school. So I spent a ridiculous amount of time just planning my school career when I was in school. Uh, One form that this took was I deliberately took, because I did not know if I wanted to be an engineer or an IT or security professional. So when I first went to community college, I only took the most broad classes possible. For the first 2 years of college, I only took gen eds. I got an associate's degree from a community college, and the degree is called Associate of Science. And that's the full name. That's how broad I went. And even going into university with an actual degree program, I only took courses that also applied to the master's degree program at first, just in case I wanted to do it later. I didn't, but that's a thing. And then another thing that happens very frequently in school is people overstay their time in school because they fail to plan the courses they need to take. Um, my alma mater, I believe they say, Eastern Michigan University, had really aggressively bad advising where they just gave a random instructor like the task of being your advisor and they don't care and they're not familiar with the curriculum more than you are. So they just pull up the same web page that you did and they're like, that class is something you should do. Um, I spent a lot of time planning exactly what to take and when and in what order, and if I would have the prereqs met at that time, if the class would be available during that semester, etc. And as a result, I graduated exactly when I want to. The same cannot be said of many people. Uh, the next thing of living in the correct quadrant in day-to-day life is my career. Um, Sometimes you're told to do more things. I like to do more things in some places and do less things in others. So, things that I am trying to do, though I do not always seem to succeed, is I would like to spend less time in the important urgent world. I'd like to spend less time cleaning out the queue and spending more time figuring out how to automate parts of the queue away, queue being the work that I ingest. Uh, I try to do less of what I know every day and try to look for new ways of doing things because sometimes they can be better. I try to work with new people when I can because new people have new ideas and newness, which can be useful. And then here's a fun thing, working overtime. Let's give a fun story example. Let's say someone wants to they work in the mailroom and they want to become the postmaster general. If this person's day to day job is licking envelopes to seal them shut, and they decide I'm going to work 18 hours a day so that I am the most advanced go getter in the world, and one day I'll eventually be postmaster general, it's not going to happen. You need to develop different skills. And a thing that I like to do is spend as little time at work as possible, much to my supervisor, Kyle's extreme frustration. And I like to spend all my free time instead learning new things, which often come in very, very much in handy at work because I try to make it all relevant. Here's a fun thing that I like to do uh, when it comes to getting lots of stuff done. I like to give myself no choice. Uh, and what I'm referencing here is important, urgent work has to get done, period. You have an exam to do at school, you need to get it done. You need to study for it or homework, etc. Me personally, I have a personality type that does not allow me to fail these tasks. So, where most people will say, do urgent, important things first and do the non urgent, important things last, I actually prefer to spend my day doing non urgent, important things. So then I spend a whole day of doing all these great things that are good for my future self. And then at the end of the day at 5 o'clock, when I normally would just go home and watch TV and eat chips, I say, oh crap, I still have to do the urgent, important stuff. And that motivates me to get a lot of work done by 9 p.m. or wake up very early the next day and do it. So it's sort of a way of getting more done by torturing yourself. I find it works very well with me, but if it doesn't work with you, you should not do it. I have a little picture here. I'm not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me. And that's what I say to problems every day. And I give myself no choice but to defeat them. Um, Fun final thoughts. If I've not convinced you to spend more time in the upper right quadrant of important but non-urgent work, uh, yeah, Kyle, I gave a silly quote to Kyle today that is exactly the first bullet point. Um, if all you do is do urgent, important things, but you never do important, non-urgent things, it's kind of like spending all of your time bucketing water out of a sinking boat without ever putting time in to patch up the boat. Um, and obviously, you don't want the boat to sink, so you do need to bucket some water out. But something that people fail to do, I think, is realistically determine when is the boat actually going to sink? Do you have time to just go patch the hole right now? You might, and then you won't have to bucket so much water. Uh, and then I find the enemy of getting stuff done to be misclassification of importance, a false positive of importance. Um, like I said, Kyle routinely comes to me as my supervisor with things that he says are important and urgent, but he's always wrong. And if I treated everything he gave me as truly of this state, I would never get any of my other things done. And finally, for external resources, I'll point at an okay book. First Things First by Stephen Covey. This is an okay book. It talks a lot about this urgent important matrix. Um, but it gives some decent advice of a fun concept is when you want to think about things that are important but non-urgent, think about how you would feel on your 80th birthday. And also realize that a lot of us end up neglecting our families and our loved ones. And it's because these often fall into the category of important, non-urgent work. Think about your 80th birthday and think about the fact that skipping a birthday party because you don't feel like going is going to feel real bad when you're old and elderly and sad and alone.
Is that my birthday?
Yes, that will be Kyle's birthday, and he'll the only one there at his 80th birthday will be me to gloat at all his failings. And that wraps up my presentation. That's all I have to say in the world. On that extraordinarily happy note, I hope I've convinced people to do important, non-urgent things. And with that, I'll pass it off to Mr. Luke Corsica.
All right. Does anybody have any questions?
Oh, yeah.
Any comments, Kyle?
I'm good for now.
All of comments from Kyle will come at my my evaluation at work.
It's PEFD season.
Yeah.
All right.
That was great.
All right.
Wahoo.
Thanks everyone for coming. We will see you all next time in December.
I'm waving.